A White House plan to cut $18 billion for research on Alzheimer's and dementia is rejected. Now families breathing a sigh of relief as our investigative reporter Sierra Cummings has been reporting. This is good news. Welcome to Behind the Investigation. I'm Anastasia Olmos, and Miss Cummings, tell us, this story actually aired before this plan was rejected.
Yeah, this is a part of a larger series called Cost of Caring. And the initial story we ran was at the midway point of January. We wanted to profile families who are caregiving for someone who has dementia, a form of dementia or Alzheimer's. And at the time that we were researching this, we saw that a part of the federal budget proposal, it would be billions of dollars cut from the National Institutes of Health, and that is the federal agency that oversees aging research, including dementia and Alzheimer's. And so it was a waiting game. We were doing this story and we were wondering what was going to happen. There was a crucial deadline, January 30th, when things would be decided as it relates to the federal budget. That's a big deal because we know so many are caregivers, just like Andrea Verdi. Listen to her story. In Midtown, between North and Piedmont Avenue, for the first time in a long time, the unforgettable is happening. Nicholas Verdi remembers. The 84-year-old who has dementia is somehow able to still perfectly strum the strings of flamenco music.
Whatever it's vibrating is what you're feeling. So there's like a feedback.
A genre of guitar melodies known for intense emotions, complex rhythms, often expressing themes of heartache, a familiar grief for Nicholas.
Does it sound all right?
It sounds amazing.
Although he knows he's missing something, he has difficulty identifying what's actually been absent. Dementia, the loss of memory, language, problem solving, and other thinking abilities that are severe enough to interfere with daily life. Alzheimer's, the most common cause.
And it's extraordinary guitar in all ways, and I am an extraordinary guitarist.
You sound extraordinary to me.
Well, I hope so.
And so you're just getting emotional because you feel like you're not playing it right?
Yeah. The music and the guitar deserve better than me.
Nick has played since 20 years old. It was second nature and his first love.
Yeah, that's a big talk.
But his greatest, daughter, Andrea Verdi.
And I always could tell him anything growing up. And I thought it was so cool. I could tell my dad anything, But in retrospect, I didn't realize it was going to be this hard.
This summer, she became the full-time caregiver for her father. 1 in 4 adults in the U.S. are caregiving for a loved one. Nearly 12 million Americans provide unpaid care for people with Alzheimer's or other dementia, reports the Alzheimer's Association. Andrea began seeing significant decline with her father this year.
He started having a hoarding problem and being very not hygienic.
Forgetting to clean, misplacing things.
I've never seen anything like it. Roaches, I was devastated that I was not a good daughter to have known that this was going on.
So she moved him out of his home, finding an apartment for them to share together. The cost of living, the cost of his care, all climbing. There is not only the burden of bills, but also an emotional tax too.
Are you scared?
Yeah, I'm scared. It's every emotion. I promise you, I cry every day, definitely. The shame and guilt, and then the anger, and you have just the worry, constant worry, anxiety.
An Atlanta News First investigation found dementia caregivers that are women or those in lower socioeconomic groups are more vulnerable to higher levels of stress, depression, and anxiety symptoms. An international study even confirmed dementia profoundly impacts the quality of life for the family and partners of patients. Facts that feel forgotten by some state and federal agencies, Andrea says. According to the latest data from American Association of Retired Persons, Georgia ranked 39th in the country for long-term care services and support. The family struggling to find affordable dementia caregiving resources in Atlanta. It's why Andrea's own mom came into town from Minnesota to help with her father. Does he ever think you all are still married?
No, and I think he grumbles about me once in a while. I'm committed to my daughter primarily, and I think that what she's doing is a good thing. We expect family to do.
As a former hospice nurse, Elaine saw firsthand dementia's devastation. But today, she's focusing on this memorable truth. Music is an intervention with proven effects on the human nervous system, helping to even manage Nicholas's behavioral complications from his diagnosis.
I hadn't heard him play for many years, and it was very touching.
He doesn't have to read music or anything like that. It's in the heart and soul, you know.
Yeah, this is a great guitar. It's so much better than I am a guitarist.
When I first watched this story and you had reported that this funding was at risk, my heart broke because we know what families are going through and people need a lot of help throughout the United States. How did this end up passing?
Well, we know that this was originally the cuts came from the White House administration. And ultimately, there were advocacy groups like the American Geriatric Society, Alzheimer's Association, the medical professionals writing to our federal lawmakers saying this plan would be detrimental to the work and the research that's happening across the country. And ultimately, that plan didn't pass. There was funding that actually increased the assistance and resources for the National Institutes of Health. So that was a really big deal. As we mentioned at the top of this, that plan had gone through would have cut about 40% of the funding for this federal agency. So that was at least a success for all the advocacy groups who were trying to rally folks to reach out to their federal lawmakers.
It works. That's what I'm hearing. Reaching out to your lawmakers really does work. In this case, you also mentioned that there was help on the state level, but what's happening with the funding there?
So we have got the Georgia chapter of the Alzheimer's Association here, and they're actively doing work every year at the state capitol, trying to get lawmakers involved in the dementia and Alzheimer's priorities. We know last legislative session, they had asked for a little more than $500,000 to help fund the dementia registry, which is essentially just what it sounds like, a registry of names and resources for our community that is suffering with Alzheimer's or dementia. At that point last year, lawmakers had not approved that $600,000 request. They only gave about $250,000. So it didn't quite meet the need, but we know later on the Alzheimer's Association got more money to fund that initiative. Now, fast forward to this year, we're actively in the legislative session. And just a few days ago, the Georgia chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, they had their own advocacy day. We know so many groups do advocacy days at the Capitol where you are on the steps, knocking on doors, walking up to any lawmaker, any local leader that will listen to you. And the Alzheimer's Association, they did just that a couple weeks ago, trying to push for their priorities. And the big top line thing for them this year is to fund services for unpaid caregivers. Just like in this story, you hear from Andrea, who's taking care of her father. She's doing that full time. She's not getting paid to do that. So she's struggling with so many things. We mentioned the cost of that medication. They now have to live together. It's just her income. all of that can be a financial strain. And then we know the further effects on mental health, all of that really taking a toll, which is how we came up with the title of the series, Cost of Caring. And so it's people like Andrea that they're fighting for. They want to make sure we can get some more funding, $2 million worth, to provide some services and resources for the families in Georgia that are providing unpaid caregiving to their loved ones.
Is there anything that people at home right now can or should do to try to support and push through this funding?
Georgia Alzheimer's associations and many other groups across the state are always seeking some kind of financial support. So if it is on your heart, if that is of interest, they're always welcoming donations. We don't want to force anybody to do anything they don't want to do, but if that's something you're interested in, their information is on our website, atlantanewsfirst.com. But there's also ways to get involved. We've got a story coming up here in a couple weeks where a caregiver, she saw a need in her community. She was struggling to find a support group. Now, we know support groups exist. It just depends on what community you're in. And at the point that she really needed help, she said she struggled to find it. And so now, fast forward months after some really serious trials and emotional turmoil in her own life, she's in a position where she's offering a support group for caregivers. So there's always work to be done. And one place to start, though, is the Alzheimer's Association. They've got a wealth of resources and tools if you want to get involved financially or just in your community in helping with like support groups.
Great, amazing. You also mentioned that this is the start of a series that you're doing, The Cost of Caring. Where's this inspiration drawn from?
You know, I had been wanting to do this story for quite some time, just like me. Alzheimer's and dementia has touched so many of our lives. And my mom was a caregiver for her mom, my grandmother. And the last couple of years of my grandmother's life, it was very difficult for my mom. She was that sandwich generation. She still had kids to take care of and young kids. My brothers were in high school and middle school. And then plus she had her own mom to take care of. And so they call it the sandwich generation. You're in between caregiving for so many different generations. And I was always really curious about how she made all of that work. So years ago, I just put in the back of my mind, I really want to do a series on what it's like to be a caregiver for someone who has dementia. Well, that sat on the back burner for a little bit. And within the last year, dementia intersected with so many of my stories. I did a story on a backlog of death certificates. And that story was about the delays in actually getting that paperwork that matters so much to funeral planning and all of the other financial accounts and things that you have to deal with. But the woman at the heart of that story who passed away, she had dementia. And I talked with her daughter for many, many hours off camera, just what it was like in those final years and that struggle. There was another story I worked on, a healthcare story, an education story, and it just seemed like dementia kept intersecting with so many of those topics. And all of these caregivers, because I was reporting on the immediate focus of that story, like the death certificate backlog, I didn't really get to spend so much time on camera going in depth into the emotional and financial and mental and physical toll dementia took on them, but also their loved one. And so I'd committed to prioritizing a series on this. And like clockwork, as soon as I started working on it, more families poured in. I've talked to so many people through GoFundMe's and through emails, and the timing just worked out. So this is the first of many stories to come where we highlight all the costs, some overt and some hidden, the cost of caring for someone with dementia.
Such an important topic to bring to the headlines right now. I know my mom and I were just talking about it last night for a friend of hers. This is touching Americans all over the country and even the world. And so we're really looking forward to your new series. Thanks, Sierra. Thanks for tuning into Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First Investigates. For more on this story, go to atlantanewsfirst.com and click on the ANF Investigates tab. You can listen to more award-winning investigations wherever you get your podcasts by searching Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First. And tune in Sundays for an hour-long episode of Uncovered, where we highlight some of our biggest investigations that impact our communities.